deploying U.S. troops is reportedly ongoing in Mogadishu, Somalia.
It's been a bloody day and night for U.S. peacekeepers in Somalia in an operation that is still going on. U.S. forces have suffered 5 deaths and as many as 24 wounded.
I got interested in the battle the day really that it happened because I saw the reports on television.
2 U.S. Black Hawk helicopters were shot down during the operation. In one case, it's not known if anyone was able to walk away from the crash site.
I was in London and I was watching, I don't think it was CNN, I think it was News, BBC, and saw this rather tragic sight of what clearly was a body or 2 bodies that had been seriously mauled and people kicking and beating them. So it certainly got my attention. Then I realized, my God, those are U.S. troops.
Images were so disturbing. He was naked, they had a rope around him, they were dragging him through the streets, and it was upsetting.
The only thing I knew was what I saw on CNN, that we lost a bunch of our young kids, and that was it.
I said, are we invading somewhere? What happened here? There were stories in the paper, but they were, little stories, or as far as I know, buried on page 5 or something like that. But I had no clue. I mean, no idea until I turned on the TV, and it was a complete shock. No one knew about it, and it surprises me to this day. All the while I was working on it, I could not believe that, first of all, no one had done it before me, and secondly, no one else was working on it. And it was as though it had slipped into the forgotten pages of history. So I think if Mark hadn't written this book, everyone kind of would have forgotten about it. Originally, I just felt it was an amazingly dramatic event, and if it was possible to find the men who had been through that experience, if I could overlap all of their stories and put them all together, it would be a very dramatic and powerful story. And it really wasn't until I began working on the project that I realized what a significant episode this was in the modern history of the American military in terms of our foreign policy over the last 10 or 15 years. I'd like to be able to say that I knew all that when I started, but the truth is I just thought it was really a good story. I began by trying to find the men who were trapped in the city overnight and interview them, Rangers mostly. And after a great deal of difficulty, managed to find the first 12 who I interviewed down at Fort Benning. The Army wasn't particularly interested at that point in helping me, but they did agree to let me interview these men when I located them. And from them, each of them knew 3 or 4 other people. And so I began really months and months of having long conversations with all of the Rangers that I could find. I was a reporter at the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I had planned, as I had for my 2 previous books, to get a contract and take a leave and work on the book. But I was talked into doing it for the newspaper by the editor, Max King, who told me that they would be interested in running it as an extended series in the paper. So even though I envisioned this project initially as a book, it was originally published as a long newspaper series, and we put it up on the internet. And that enabled basically everybody who was involved in this episode, including Somalis, to have a shot at it, and I did. I got a lot of criticism about little mistakes that I had made. The advantage of doing it in that way was I was able to instantly correct it, because on the internet it's just a completely fluid manuscript. And so when I sat down to enlarge the series then into a book, I had the advantage really of thousands of people's criticisms of the story. It was an amazing read. It was really exciting. It was an incredible first-person, second-by-second account of war, which I'd never read before. So you can read all these accounts of war, but none of them that are second-by-second, and from all different points of view. So the thing that struck me was, this is a war book that puts you right in the soldier's boots, and makes you run along the streets with them, and it just blew me away.
It was great when you have the ability to take a look at something from a journalist's point of view, and Mark Bowden came in and really did an amazing job with his book and took you inside the lives of these young men and what they went through, and none of them were really prepared for what happened.
Jerry Bruckheimer bought the rights to the story before the book was even published, so it was really off of the newspaper series that they got interested.
We received the book itself in the galley form before it came out and fell in love with it.
They were interested along with a few other film companies, but we sold it to Jerry Bruckheimer. And I began discussing things with them probably in early 1998 and sat down and wrote the original adaptation of the book into the first draft of the screenplay for the movie. I had never written a screenplay before, and I wanted to take a shot at it because I'd been involved in another film some years ago, and I was just there as a consultant. It was a movie based on a story that I had written, and I felt it would be fun and interesting. It would be a way of getting myself more involved if I could take a crack at the screenplay. And Jerry was game enough to let me have a shot at it, even though I've never written a screenplay before. He literally gave me books of how to write screenplays, and I'm sure they all got a kick out of what I produced. But I enjoyed it very much, and in fact, you know, much of what I wrote in the original draft of the screenplay, some of what I wrote, I wouldn't say much, some of what I wrote is still in the movie.
Durant. Michael Durant.
Yes.
You are the ranger who kills my people?
I'm not a ranger. I'm a pilot.
That's right. None of you Americans smoke anymore.
I felt too that because I was the author of the book, that they would expect me to be a real stickler for trying to keep it as accurate and as close to the book as possible. So I probably went a little overboard in trying to demonstrate that I was willing to dramatize, that I was willing to create composite characters and situations in order to get across maybe a general idea of what was going on, but without necessarily being, you know, faithful to the word of the book. But when Ken did his draft, I think he was a whole lot more faithful to the text itself.
He had written a version of the script, and you know, I read it and I wanted to go in a little bit of a different direction, get back to his book. And he was just the greatest guy. He was totally nice and knew that we had to do some things for the movie purposes and was completely helpful, always available. Anytime I have a question, I call him up. Sometimes I have a question that he doesn't know, like, what were they feeding them in the UN grain distribution thing? It's like, I don't know, wheat, you know. But anything with that day, he knows inside and out.
The challenge is taking a story that takes place over 15 to 20 hours, that involves well over 100 characters, and shaping it into a 2-hour-long drama that centers upon a relatively small number of main characters. A lot of events happened in different places. A lot of very dramatic things happened over the course of those 15 hours. And as a screenplay, as someone who's trying to write a screenplay, you have to try to incorporate as many of those episodes as possible into the story, but you have to develop a coherent, dramatic arc to plug all those things into.
I'm always thinking structure. Screenplays are structure, and that's my first thought. What's the story? What's going to make a good story? Forget that it's a true story. How's this going to be a good movie? So I thought Black Hawk crashes was one of the major things, of course, that you have to put in the movie. Another one crashes. These guys gather around it, get stuck in the city overnight. There's a story.
The event took about 18 hours, and you know, we can't spend it, you don't want to spend 18 hours in the theater, so you had to condense it down into 2 hours. So, you know, there are a lot of casualties when that happens. You have to combine characters and combine some events and do some things that you wish you didn't have to do.
The challenges were over 100 parts in this book. How do you make the audience follow a few characters? Because you can't really make a completely ensemble movie. People aren't going to be able to care about the characters. You know, people aren't going to know who they are. Is that so-and-so? And when these people die, which really happened, people have to care. I mean, it is a movie, and you want people to care. You don't want to hit them over the head, but you want them to really be moved. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm hoping this is a really moving story and that people will be invested in the characters.
You tell my parents that I fought well today.
that I fought hard.
You're gonna tell him yourself, okay? You hear me? All right?
The Humvees here?
They're coming, Jamie. They're coming. You just gotta hang in there a little bit. You can hold on for just a little bit. You can do that.
I can't. It's nothing.
It's nothing. It's nothing.
It's nothing.
It's nothing.
Nothing.
We had to have a main ranger who you saw the movie from his point of view, so we picked Eversman, who actually, in real life, went out on the Humvee squad. And he wasn't in the Alamo overnight, and I said, we've got to do some kind of fictionalization here and put him in the Alamo. Some of the Delta guys, I distilled some things that other people did into that character, as long as it didn't disrespect the memory of these guys. Whenever I could, I would smash some things together, cut some things out, change the timeline. You have to do it. I mean, there's no way around it. Otherwise, you have a completely ensemble movie and it would just confuse the hell out of people.
Well, what you try to do is find a strong narrative, and you find a character to take you through that narrative, or a couple of characters to take you through that narrative. That's what we did with Eversman and Hoot, Garrison, and Steele, and some of the other characters. They're the driving the plot of the movie, and you try to build them into very strong characters, and those are the ones we kind of focused on, had to unfortunately combine some other characters into their character.
There's an awful lot of guys' stories, as you can imagine, in the real story. So for movie-making purposes, some of the characters have been amalgamated together. Some of the names have been changed for various reasons. I fall in that category. I'm playing Grimes. There was no Grimes there.
Well, my character is an amalgam. He's based on a few different people who were really there. And the character's gone through a few changes in the development, where initially he was derived from a specific person, and now he's kind of like a mixture of a few different Delta guys brought into one, which is very flattering for me because he gets to do some amazingly heroic things. Which was good and bad in terms of research. It meant that I couldn't speak to a particular person and base the character solely on that person, but it made it a little bit more interesting in that I could create something myself a little bit more.
I'm playing somebody who, he's very real. He's now a lieutenant colonel of the 10th Mountain Regiment. The irony being that's the people who came in at the end of the night and rescued everybody. But is what I'm doing and everything I'm saying exactly what he did and said? No, because a lot of the characters have been compressed, and a lot of the incidents have been compressed and changed. And so he's a composite of real and fiction.
As an actor, you feel a lot of responsibility toward that person, particularly on somebody who is, you know, these guys who are all really heroes, you know, and courageous men putting their lives on the line for a greater cause. You know, it puts a lot of pressure on you to try and, you know, do the best that you can to portray them in the right light.
The first thing you want to do is become the guy, and obviously I didn't get to meet the guy when I was over there, which was a shame. So I kind of went the route of, I've got what I've got in the book, and I've got what I've got in the script, and then I just kind of go with what my instincts on the character.
You don't want to improvise too much. You don't want to make him something that he's not, and you don't want to shortchange him either. You know, so you want to do as much research as you can, and bring as much of the reality of the character, you know, to the film.
But on the other hand, you know, when you're playing a character like this, sometimes it's better to keep it on a fictional basis rather than trying to imitate a particular man. You know what I mean? Because it is a fictional character ultimately, even though it's portraying somebody in real life.
Playing somebody exactly the way they are, that's mimicry. That's not really acting. It's not really living through the part. It's good to be able to get there, but I just listened to what all the other guys had to say about him and tried to put that in there. He was kind of a best friend to everybody, kind of a father figure, kind of a, you know, really together dude.
You can't necessarily embody that person because I've never met him, I don't know. Just simply trying to look like a soldier first and foremost. Get all those little details right that make it look good. But then when it comes down to a more extreme situation like treating a man that's dying, then yeah, you do begin to wonder if you're doing justice to somebody who actually had to go through that. It does occur.
You can't burden yourself with every moment of it because there is a certain amount of artistic license that you take. You kind of do what you can, do your homework, be as respectful as you can, and then honor the tone of the script and the story. That's all you can do.
My character's name is Gary Gordon, and he's a special ops soldier. He's a sniper. Of course, when I found out about this Gary Gordon, whom I'm playing, who was a hero, he is a hero. What he did back then was amazing. And the level of skill in his profession as a soldier was truly outstanding.
Friendlies! It's good to see you! It's good to see you! How bad? My leg's broken! My back feels weird! Gotta get you out of here, buddy! Pulling him out! Cover!
I mean, he died for his country, trying to save friends, comrades. It's been a worry to get it right, the soldiering part of it. Because it would be terrible if his friends or people who knew him saw this and they went, oh my God, this is wrong. This is like a Hollywood version of... so yeah, I've been very concerned about that.
They basically held off hundreds of people from killing this pilot until they both were overwhelmed and swarmed by, hundreds of Somalians.
Any normal individual seeing that situation, that scenario, would say, oh, back off, don't do that. This is suicide, don't do it. But for these two guys, their level of training, they clearly believed they could make it. And they did do a very good job for a long time, and they saved Mike Duran's life.
Gordy's gone, man. I'll be outside. Good luck.
These two Delta soldiers who I think they had to know they were going into a situation where the odds of them coming out were very little. And that they risked their life anyway. It's the kind of heroism you just don't meet and think it really happens. They went in alone, two guys, against hundreds and hundreds, and really alone. They had to run through the streets just to find their way there, and then to give up their lives. I mean, it was very moving, and meeting Mike Durant, I mean, he's just so grateful. It's what they all would do for each other, and I mean, all of them. There's a lot of stories like this during the 18-hour battle of people just not going to quit and never going to let another soldier be left behind. But these two particularly were just extraordinary.
Every guy kind of came up to me and just said, do this guy proud because he was the real deal. All of these guys are incredibly professional, and then so to say that about another guy like that is, I mean, he was the real deal and never bragged about it. Was, in his own way, kind of like the Michael Jordan of helicopter pilots, but would never put it in your face. Would always keep it light out of survival. That was his way.
You want to do the best job. You don't want to disrespect him. You want to do a good job. So he's happy with not only your performance, but the way you portray him, and especially with these guys, the way you portray a Ranger. I mean, they have a lot of pride about being a Ranger, and their heart and soul, their life. That's their life is, being a Ranger. So it's hard. It's interesting. I want to do a good job. I want to represent him in the best possible way I can.
I believe for the majority, all these actors are committed to portraying these people as heroically and brave as they actually were.
First, I started out with, I got the guys on the helicopter right away on page 1, and you sort of see what they were thinking that morning, and you close in on each guy's face, and you cut to what he was doing that morning, you know, whether it's washing his laundry or getting his gun ready or something, and you get to know a little bit about him. And Jerry Bruckheimer says, you know what, no flashbacks, I don't like this. Let's get to know him a little bit in the barracks. So Jerry really shaped the first act. And what he impressed on me was, you have to care. And sometimes I think, oh, people just care because it's an amazing story, and you don't really need to get to know these guys. But I really understood by draft number 20 that, oh, Jerry Bruckheimer has a point, you know, you really do have to care about these guys.
I think people are drawn to the action and the drama of the story, certainly, but I think that you form a strong emotional attachment to these young Americans, some of whom are only 18, 19, 20 years old, who've been thrust in this terrible and impossible situation and are forced to fight for their lives. I think that there's just, on a human level, anybody can identify with their desperation, with their predicament, and I think that we also come to admire, you know, their courage and their training and their professionalism in extricating themselves from this mess. I deliberately removed myself from this story. I didn't pass judgment on the events. I tried to be a vehicle for telling the story. I think that certain kinds of stories call upon the writer to be nothing more than a window pane. And I even tried to strip down the prose in the book so that where it reflects certain dialects or attitudes or usages, I drew that from the soldiers themselves. And so even the prose in the book is shaped by the way these guys talk and the way these guys think. I only came into the story really at my editor's urging at the very end. After the story was over, I wrote an epilogue for the book because I wanted people to understand how it was put together and why I wrote the story and why this event was such a significant one. But I don't pass judgment on these events, and I'm not especially critical of anyone involved in it, because I think that you would have to have stood in their shoes and been through what they went through to be in a position to criticize them, really.
If you talk to any soldier that's been through a skirmish or a war, what they tell you, the only thing that saved their lives was either the man next to them or their training.
What came across in Georgia from a lot of the people was the strictness of the training that they receive, and how much they could rely on that when they get into the situation.
They say that until you've done something 2,500 times, you don't have the muscle memory. And that's what it is. They're counteracting human instincts, and that's why they train them so hard.
You know, they're trained to finish their mission and their objective, but just as important is to take care of your fellow Ranger.
They're very proud, the Rangers, of how their training worked and how these 19 and 20-year-old boys behaved on the day.
They had to cover each other, and they relied on their training. It's a testament to their training that any of them made it through at all.
For actors, we feel it's really important, if they're going to portray a military role, to actually be part of the military. So we try to put them through a boot camp, and not a Hollywood boot camp. We wanted the actors to have the respect for the military, what these kids go through, how they respect their officers, the physical torture that they go through, and feel a part of that. So when they're portraying their characters, they can draw on that. They also can draw on the tactics that they learned during this boot camp.
I'm a big believer in making sure that before we start shooting an action movie such as this one, that the weapon skills and the body motion, the body movement, the body language skills are taught up front, so we don't have to coach the actors so intensely on set. It serves no purpose in my mind to simply put these people through a harassing session up front to simply say, I've been through hell. What skills have you learned? That's my question. What do I have to teach you before you take this shot? The answer should be nothing, because we've already had it in a skill training session prior to shooting. Because of the intense support we're getting from DoD, I had 3 separate commands that stood up a training element. I had the 75th Ranger Regiment, Fort Benning, Georgia, stand up a training element to train our Rangers. Our actors actually went down to that command and went through a modified Ranger indoctrination program. And it was without question one of the finest training sessions I've ever seen any group of actors go through. Those actors playing the other unit or the assault element went through a training program in Fort Bragg. The 7th Special Forces group stood up a training A-team to teach those guys the skills required to portray their characters properly. The pilots actually went to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where the SOAR, 160 SOAR, or TF-160 people, have their helicopter training program. So each of the commands that were there have had a shot at training the people, portraying their characters. So it's unparalleled in any DoD training program that has ever been put forth before.
So we arrive at Fort Benning, and haircuts was the first thing.
Let me get a shape up. He's got a lot to cut off.
I actually like this haircut. It's real quick. No messing around here. Once you get the haircut, it all kind of comes together. It's all about the haircut.
You're gonna leave the eyebrows, right?
Oh yeah, we'll leave the eyebrows for you.
They have like hoovers on the end of the clippers so they don't lose any hair on the floor. It's just like... Vanity out the window, you're just gone. Okay, cool.
I've lost like a pound.
You talking to me? I don't see anybody else in the room. You're not talking to me.
I feel myself transforming, turning into a killing machine.
I just want mine thin and short, like a little mohawk, please. The reason why I did this movie was because of the haircut. This haircut's mint.
Oh, dude.
Yeah, I want like a fade. I love having my head shaved. Yeah.
That doesn't bother me. It'll grow back, I hope.
Feel much better now. Yes. Nice, clean haircut. Thank you.
R is for Ranger.
R is for Ranger.
A is for all the way.
A is for all the way.
It's not boot camp, it's Ranger orientation, and it was awesome.
We were quite strictly told that it was not boot camp. It was a Ranger orientation, because the training that we had was far less severe to the training that they have, I think was the idea, but it was a very good taste of what, you know, they go through.
Ranger! Oh, yeah! Oh, yeah!
We learned what it's like to be a Ranger, or what it's like to be a Ranger, you know, because the Rangers really are very elite. They work really hard to become a Ranger. You've got to really want to be one.
I thought we were just playing normal soldiers. I didn't know we were playing actually elite soldiers who are, in the top percentiles of the Army. So that was really intense.
Oh, yeah. Oh, right. Oh, yeah. Looking good. Looking good. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
The Ranger orientation for the actors, the purpose of that was to give the actors a very quick snapshot of the tactics and techniques that Rangers use in ground fighting. Kind of give them a history of the Ranger Regiment, give them a detailed history of the Battle of Mogadishu and how the Rangers were involved in that, and then to show them how we do things so that when they are portraying us, it looks as realistic as possible.
The approach they took with us was to get us to know all about the mentality of Rangers, rather than the kind of taking us to the camp and kicking our ass.
I'm going to teach you 4 knots, right? These are the 4 knots you need to know to tie down your equipment properly. You're going to be the square knot, handle line flow in, the clove hitch, and the girth hitch, and the safety line. Right? This is RBA, Ranger Body Armor. It's the first thing you're going to put on. If anyone wants to feel it before I put it on, come on up. Anyone want to feel it? Yeah. RBA itself weighs about 24 pounds, and your helmet weighs 4 pounds, your weapon weighs 7 pounds. The thing is, you don't want your equipment just when you run and turn. If you have it real loose, it's going to just wrap around in front of you, and it's going all over the place.
Ranger orientation was great. I wish it was 2 weeks instead of 1. We only had 1 week.
We were up at 5:30, or out in the street, falling in at 6:10. We were moving over to the athletic field at 6:20.
We'd go for like a 3-mile run, and then we'd come back and we'd do press-ups, we'd do dips, we'd do everything.
We had class to educate us on everything from the proper technique of infiltrating a building and clearing a room to like weapons.
Weapons training, how to move, how to clear a room, understanding the chain of command, all of those things.
Basically, we did a lot of stuff on how to look like a Ranger.
But every day started out with what's called PT, which is physical training.
6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 50. Come on. Come on.
Now the Rangers had boot camp. The Delta guys, we had fun.
Here's your body armor, pistol belt, this thigh holster, grip tag.
Let me just give you an example. I think the first day the Rangers were at Fort Benning, they were like, all right, this is the Ranger Creed. The first day we were in Fort Bragg, they're going, see that door there? Let's blow it up. That started the week off. They stayed in barracks, we stayed in a Marriott. It was a whole other ball game.
There were only 3 of us at the Delta boot camp, and we had about 8 guys teaching us.
We were expecting just to be briefed and a lot of talking. And instead, what happened was that we got to do everything.
The first day that we were there, we began to work with weapons.
We want to keep a low profile, so we're not bumping into walls and all other kinds of matter. So you're in like this, cack.
What you gotta do is let gravity work for you. Tuck it underneath your arm, hit your magazine release button, it'll fall straight out. Then you can tilt it. So you tilt it first, you're not using gravity to get it out.
I'm gonna go to the pistol. Normally carry fire. There you go.
In that week, it became very apparent how incredibly skilled and trained these young guys are. I mean, they're really drilled.
Try and walk from your knees down. Okay, you're gonna have some movement up here, but you're not. Okay, you see how I'm bouncing? Okay, now I'm keeping my knees together almost, making them knock against one another, and I'm walking light on my feet. See how I'm not bouncing anymore? Elbows tight in. You try and get from, you're like trying to walk a little sideways. Okay, try and keep from doing that. Try and keep your body square.
How they move, how they cover each other. I mean, they never sprint. You never sprint because you lose discipline. They move at a steady pace, covering each other, walking down the street.
They teach you a few little slogans like slow is smooth and smooth is fast. And that means, just keep it slow and smooth, so that you can, because if you're bouncing around, you can't see everything.
You know what? Save your life.
Relax. You're a little tense. Be careful doing the side step so you're not tripping over yourself. I can already ID by right here. There's a threat right there, right? Okay? Now as I'm moving, I can be breaking down here. So I'm not doing this.
Okay. Clearing down the wall,
There you go, good.
Okay, number 2's right here on you, hold it. Yeah. Okay, got my weapon, boom. Okay, don't lose momentum, there you go, there you go. Don't move your head to the weapon, move the weapon to your head. You're turning around. Not too bad. 4.
Oh, well, where are you going?
I'm gonna,
You're getting shot.
I'm getting shot. Please, any criticism I give you here is constructive criticism. It's not meant to belittle you at all.
That's it. See how slow he went? Slow and smooth.
One of the interesting things about being in our boot camp was the idea that they instill a violence into the soldiers. They train them to deal with situations in a violent manner. As a non-military person, it took me by surprise that in actual fact, they teach them not only to take a building, but to take it with violence and force.
Violence of action is both mental and physical, okay? Both mental and physical. You use violence of action to gain or regain surprise. Make sense? You gotta tell yourself that you are the shit. You are the man, and nobody can mess with you, okay? That's the mental. The physical. Be aggressive. Be aggressive.
It's quite a bizarre idea that occupied my mind for some time afterwards.
You've already got this cleared, so your rifle is more or less pointed right there. Yeah. It's cleared. If there's any problems, you're in too close with this wall to engage, you're gonna have to just, and then this guy just flows past you. You pin this guy up here, and then take out your knife and finish him off with your hatchet.
We're going to be working right up close with the explosives today. I mean, it's the real stuff, real McCoy. So just go step by step by what we tell you to do, and we're going to be right there with you. You know, don't do anything until we tell you to do it. If you have a question about something, you know, ask it, because the first time you're wrong with demolitions could very well be the last time you're wrong with demolitions, okay? The whole idea of this charge, what we're doing here, we place it along the hinge side. You just start at the top, place it up here as high as you can, insert your thumbtacks in as best you can. Okay, and as I start pulling it down, see how I'm pulling the double stick tape?
I gather that most times that you'd be putting something on the door, there's a chance that somebody's behind it, you'd be very quiet about it?
Yeah,
Yes.
you're as quiet as you can be, Bill.
As quiet as you can be. Now, once I get the charge all the way down on this, what I'll do is go ahead and prime it. Okay, just take my firing system and tie it on firmly. Everybody good? Going hard on the breaching bay! Okay, so I'll remove the safeties. I just look real quick. Gotcha. Let's go. Crouch down, keep an eye on the charge, watch it. Get up, let's run, let's go. Switch right back.
I was able to go down to Fort Campbell, where the 160th is. I met about 13 of the Little Bird pilots, the smaller helicopter pilots. I met Mike Durant.
I'm Mike Durant, and we met briefly for the first time over at the simulator today. Retired recently as CW4. I was a flight lead of the Ranger Element Pilot in Command of Super 6-4. The briefing that you're going to see today is really a macro level briefing, and hopefully I'm not insulting what you know about the overall mission, but I've given this thing probably hundreds of times at this point, and there has been 7 years that have gone by, and not everybody knows all these facts, and if they did know them at one time, they may have forgotten them. So this really rolls it all up into one, from the time the U.S. got involved, really taking it all the way through till the withdrawal, the release of some of the folks that were apprehended by Task Force Ranger, that kind of stuff.
I was surprised by how moved I was by meeting these guys. They were so not chest out and macho guys. They were all very calm, very relaxed, very professional. And then when they started telling their stories, it was a bit shocking.
Gary Gordon went down first. He went down on the left side of the aircraft, but I have no idea under what circumstances. All I know is I heard him say something to lead me to believe that he had been hit. Like, damn, I'm hit, or something like that. I never saw him again. Well, now, any sense of comfort I might have had thinking a rescue force is there is now gone. I've only seen 2 guys. One of them's down. Now this one's out of ammunition, possibly, if he's asking for more weapons. We are in dire straits. I had run out of ammunition. I placed my weapon across my chest, looking up at the sky, assuming that it was over. I mean, there's nothing you could do.
We got to meet a lot of the people that we would be playing.
And they were there because they'd chosen to come and talk to us about it and answer questions, and they ended up staying the evening and we had a few beers. It was incredibly useful and interesting and helpful.
Right. If there's any time when we started feeling fear, was that next morning, because there was almost a slight sense of panic because things weren't right. Like, this is the Ranger Regiment. We're the most funded, we're the best unit in the world, and here we are running out of this town on foot.
Right.
Why? How is this happening? And that was the kind of mentality, and it was just like, shoot and go and just pray to God a bullet and hit you running across the street.
People were bounding properly, they weren't just running the shit.
Yeah, no, we were bounding properly, but you just got the sense that at any second, because our training was good and everybody was in great shape, it held together. But I really did feel like that next morning, and that's how I get through anything in military training or got through it. Was just, I just know that you rely on the training. The training's, the equipment, the training, and the guy next to you is going to pull you through it.
I think this is McKnight's Chief, actually. Good God. These are the bullet holes that came through the front. Good God. What's this here? That's an ammo box that the gunner, this is the strap that the gunner would sit on up top.
So he's free, really?
Yeah.
And he can swing around?
He can swing all the way around, exactly.
When we got back to the stadium, there was a lot of the 10th Mountain men who would come in to help get us out. We're over there, and this was Somalia, and I remember feeling cold. I think I had spent so much adrenaline, and I was shaking. They were giving us hot tea and coffee, and it was like 70 degrees outside, and all of us were just sort of standing around, and then we got together and we started getting the damage report and find out who we lost, and it was kind of a shocker.
The simulator is unbelievable. It's like flying a helicopter, so you really go through the paces of what they had to go through.
It's tricky I still can't quite figure out if I have to give it, oh wow, that's very cool. Sorry. I suddenly saw a helicopter fly underneath me there, and I started going towards it. Oh, I just killed us. Damn. Now, how did I do that?
For the safety of everyone involved, I never flew one of these helicopters because I don't know how to fly a helicopter. It's pretty intense stuff. All your motor skills are needed at every moment, but it's the hardest thing you've ever kind of witnessed because it's a push and pull at all times, and it's so completely delicate. Everything, it's so responsive.
No, I can't do anything with my feet though, right?
Yes.
Oh.
Okay, lower the collector. Lower the collector. All the way down. Level the aircraft. Okay, now we're in auto rotation. Okay. Notice how it's smoothed out. We're in auto rotation. Come to the ground.
And now pull up. Oh, hold on now. Oh no, we're in trouble.
Now you're crashing.
Oh, we're dead. Yeah. Damn.
Steps. 1 up, 2 up, 3 up, 4 up. Church left. Got you covered. Boom!
Okay, let's do it. Eric, you stopped there. I don't know if Harry was in your way or what. The main thing is just keep going. Like I said, even if you're fucking up, fuck up aggressively.
Yeah.
Me, that's my war wound. Took down a ranger.
Oh, come on, man.
People were kind of dropping like flies. I think
and I was one of the flies, I'm afraid to say.
The actors aren't rangers, and we realized that after about day one, but they did a great job. They came together as a team towards the end there and maintained their motivation. We threw some things at them that were physically and mentally demanding, and they did a great job.
We basically worked towards being able at the end of the week to travel through a street theoretically under fire like a group of trained rangers.
In Somalia, although they were under fire, they got a call. Hey, you need to get your platoon from this end of the city to the other end of the city. All right? And that's what we're going to talk about, just moving through a city. In a non-permissive environment where you may take fire at any moment, you want to get through that pretty quickly, as quickly as you can, because speed is your security to an extent here. Go. Go.
All right. So. Move. Here we go.
We did some stuff at the end in a mock-up street, village type thing, where we had to work our way down the street and avoid being shot. I got shot, of course, and take out, you know, the people who were shooting at us. So like a mock-up battle situation. And I wished we'd spend the week doing that, because that's what would have been most relevant for this film.
At the end of the week, we had a mock Black Hawk Down situation.
They took us into a cinder block city. And this was the amazing part of it all. To get to this, where they said, okay, you're gonna start off here, you're gonna fast rope off that building, you're gonna go in here. There will be doors in there. If there's a yellow marker on the door, a single one, you're gonna shotgun it. If there are two, you're gonna blow that door. You're gonna move through there. There might be people in there. If there are people in there, flex cuff them, you gotta take them out. Live people.
And then supposedly a helicopter had been shot down and we had to get from A to B, and in between were all these rangers who were more than willing to shoot at us.
All right, continue to move it, gentlemen. You know what to do here. Use the vehicle for that. Slow down.
I've never been so exhausted in my life. It was like 50 minutes. It was amazing.
It's all I could think of was when I took my helmet off and had all the heavy gear that was only an hour and a half or 2 hours, and these guys were there for 30 or 36. That was the first thing that hit me, was just how physically demanding it would be.
Almost more important than all the training is the creed that they live by. It's like a religion.
We thought that it was an unwritten rule that you didn't leave a man behind. It turns out it's a written rule. There's a thing called the Ranger Creed, which is 6 stanzas that they recite every morning en masse.
First stanza of the Ranger Creed. Repeat after me. Recognizing I volunteer as a Ranger.
Recognize I volunteer as a Ranger.
Fully knowing the hazards of my chosen profession.
Fully knowing the hazards of my chosen profession.
I'll always endeavor.
I'll always endeavor.
To uphold the prestige.
To uphold the prestige.
Honor.
Honor.
And high spirit accord.
And high spirit accord.
Of my Ranger regiment.
Of my Ranger regiment.
The basic center is that you never leave a ranger behind. And that is paramount. I mean, that is drilled into them from the word go, you know, over and above their weapons training, everything else is a kind of way of life.
The Night Stalkers' motto is NSDQ. Night Stalkers don't quit. You never quit. The Rangers, you never leave a man behind.
They wanted to explain that to us and drill it into us more than they wanted to teach us how to hold the gun.
Acknowledging the fact.
Acknowledging the fact.
That a Ranger is a more elite soldier.
That a Ranger is a more elite soldier.
Who arrives at the cutting edge of battle.
Who arrives at the cutting edge of battle.
By land.
By land.
Sea.
Sea.
Or air.
Or air.
I accept the fact.
I accept the fact.
That as a Ranger.
That as a Ranger.
My country has picked me.
My country has picked me.
To move further.
To move further. Faster. And fight harder. Than any other soldier.
They become brothers and they depend on each other. You know, the man on your shoulder is the man covering you, is the man who can save your life as much as you can save theirs. You don't come across that kind of relationship every day.
They have this mindset of your back is covered by your Ranger buddy's back. You watch your Ranger buddy's back. You don't think about your own, you think about everyone else's. And therefore, if everyone thinks like that, everyone's back should be covered.
Never shall I fail my comrades.
Never shall I fail my comrades.
I always keep myself mentally alert.
I always keep myself mentally alert.
Physically strong.
Physically strong.
And morally straight.
And morally straight.
And I will show more than my share of the task.
And I'll share more than my share of the task.
Whatever it may be.
Whatever it may be.
100%.
And then some.
It's like having, 200 best friends, but even more so, that will die for you. I would be lying if I said I knew what that meant, because I really don't. I can get close to it, but I don't really know that I would have it in me to die for somebody,
Gallantly will I show the world. And I'm a specially selected well-trained soldier. My courtesy superior officers. Needless to dress.
And care of equipment.
And care of equipment.
Shall set the examples for others to follow.
Shall set the examples for others to follow.
Certainly you get a brotherhood when you go to boot camp and you do those kind of things that we did.
We all pushed ourselves beyond our physical limits. And there's a camaraderie and a support network that comes from having seen everybody dropping from exhaustion or feeling like they can't go on and dragging them forward.
There was a real sense of coming together for the cause because we knew we couldn't get through it without helping each other.
Energetically I'll meet the enemies of my country.
Energetically will I meet the energies of my country.
I shall defeat them on the field of battle.
I shall defeat them on the field of battle.
For I'm better trained.
For I'm better trained.
And will fight with all my might.
And will fight with all my might.
Surrender is not a range of words.
Surrender is not a range of words.
I'll never leave a fallen comrade.
I'll never leave a fallen comrade.
To fall into the hands of the enemy.
To fall into the hands of the enemy.
And under no circumstances.
And under no circumstances.
Will I ever embarrass my country.
Will I ever embarrass my country.
These are real characters. This is a real guy. This is a real man I'm portraying, and we just want to bring integrity to it, and and a lot of respect.
On the last day of boot camp, we all got an anonymous note pushed under our door that thanked us for our hard work and asked us to tell their story true. And it was signed from all the boys who died. And it was one of the most moving experiences of the week.
I left there with a lot of respect for not only the Rangers, but everybody who serves for our country. And it made me work harder as an actor to portray these guys correctly and as accurately as possible.
Readily while displayed!
Readily while displayed!
The intestinal fortitude required!
The intestinal fortitude required!
To fight on to range your objective!
To fight on to range your objective!
And complete the mission!
And complete the mission!
Will I be the lone survivor?
Will I be the lone survivor?
Rangers lead the way!
Rangers lead the way!
The choice of Morocco was not because I'd made Gladiator there and not because I really love Morocco, but it seemed to be the place that somebody suggested would fulfill all my needs for Mogadishu. Branko said, I know this place that I think might be a good second for Mogadishu. So I said, go,
I told Ridley, I will find locations. And I came here, Saleh and Rabat. And I made hundreds of pictures. I was thinking that's the right place to shoot.
When he came back with it, we looked at the photographs and basically said, that'll do, that'll work. We were straight in. Working class district, which, it's people saying, yeah, God, it's pretty rough. When you get used to going in there every day, it's actually rather nice. And the whole community, working class community, were fine, But the position of the town, the little town, next to the Atlantic Ocean was beautiful, It fitted our needs dramatically well.
Without the look, we wouldn't be here. Also, Morocco has had a lot of film companies come in and done a lot of filming, so you have a lot of Moroccan crew that are technically excellent at what they do. They've been trained over the last 20 years by international productions that have come in here and made this industry blossom here in Morocco. So when you come here, there's prop people, there's lighting people, there's camera people you can use, production people you can use. So they're already ready to go. You don't have to bring them in from the States or from other parts of Europe. You're in areas where it's very difficult to shoot. Or you're in populated areas and you're making a lot of noise. People aren't really pleased with what you're doing. There's a lot of poverty, unfortunately, in this particular part of Brabant that we're in. So there were people that were upset that we were here.
Considering what we were doing and where we were doing it, which was tricky, with view to people on the streets being accepted there. It was quite a political process that we had to go through, keep everybody happy. We employed a lot of Moroccans who were grateful for that. I think they were just grateful that we were in there and there was something to do on an organized fashion every day.
We originally listed 1,100 that we've wardrobed and they're ready to go. They fall into 3 categories. The core group, which are up front, that we train to do stunts and things like that. The front line, which have the better Somali look as close as I could get, and then all the others. So we've wardrobed 1,100 so far.
I've actually bought probably over 2,500 outfits to be able to cover the 1,500. Plus, we have a core group of 50 who are playing the militia, and they need to have 4, 5, 6 outfits each. And those 4, 5, 6 outfits have to also be quadrupled for the bullet hits that they might take. So it mounts up. In fact, it could be nearer 3,000, I think. Put your ticket inside. What's this? No! Every day! No bandaged heads, okay? And the biggest task was just getting my head around how much stuff I needed to buy and not being able to go to Somalia and buy the stuff because you can't go there. So I went around ports and to Marrakesh, Casablanca and here and bought similar stuff. Also, I bought a lot of fabrics for the ladies from England, from various shops that sell African clothing, and also went around similar places here that sell old fabrics. And I found loads of fabrics from the late 80s and 70s, actually, that were stuffed in the back of shops. It's been a real kind of lengthy process, actually, choosing each piece.
We'll come in at a 45-degree angle to the set. As we do that, the little birds will be in a trail formation, the Black Hawks will be in a staggered left formation. As we cross the archway, or there, somewhere thereabouts, Star 4-4 will make his left brake to set up for his landing to the rooftop as depicted. The other 3 little birds will land to the street in accordance with the boxes and as depicted there.
Commencez à marcher dans cette direction et vous allez vers les gens des bananes là-bas.
It's an enormous crew and everybody speaks another language, and how they understand each other I don't understand.
The people from Liberia and Nigeria, they speak English. The people from Ghana speak Creole. The people from Senegal, some English, some Wolof. The tribal languages, of course, which I don't have a clue. Most of them French.
Quelque part, d'accord? Ce que je veux, c'est que...
1 minute.
S'il vous plaît, on va mélanger. Mettez-vous au milieu, d'accord? Éparpillez-vous au milieu, là. Ne restez pas sur... A bunch of people standing there talking would be great, wouldn't it? This will be before them. Little bird, they run, little bird, land.
And then they're going to land, and then he's going to cross the street.
It's been enthralling for me to watch because if you can imagine a writer alone in his room in front of his keyboard trying to conjure up in his mind images of something that happened years earlier and make it come to life in words. 5 years down the road, you're standing on a rooftop and you're watching literally thousands of people reenact this moment that you had kind of labored to imagine. In a way, it's almost like you willed this vision into reality.
The realism, it seems so true. Talking with the other Rangers that were there, it was interesting to watch them on the first day in the insertion, is that they had to stand back a little bit. They got really kind of affected because, obviously it brought up a lot of, different emotions about the event. But they said how realistic that we have it here.
When I walked up to the set today, when I looked around, and I have to say, it was eerie how much that scene looked like Somalia. I literally had to take a step back and kind of scratch my head. It was surreal.
It was my duty as a director to try and bring this as close to documentary credibility and accuracy as possible. That's what I'm there to do. It's not the conventional drama which has backstory, talking about mum, dad, and the brothers and sisters all back home and all that stuff that we've heard all before a million times on every war movie. I didn't want to do that. I just wanted to not have that because I felt it was about the insertion and the exit and what do you feel after that.
The realism, the total realism is what will separate this film from any other. And I really hope it gets out the fact that there is so much realism in this film.
The insertion was actually conducted by the troops that we had on set. The 75th Ranger Regiment provided a platoon of Rangers, all fast rope qualified, and they, in fact, conducted the insertion from the Black Hawks. It was as close to the real thing as you can get because it was the real thing.
The Rangers came to conduct all the fast rope scenes that they were going to do in the movie. We wanted to lend as much support as we could to give the movie production as much realism as possible. And we're the only infantry unit that can conduct fast rope operations.
We weren't allowed to fast rope, which is a shame because we did fast rope in training. Fast rope is when they drop this huge rope out of a helicopter and everybody jumps off and slides down and burns their hands. It was terribly frustrating on the day that we couldn't do it. Of course, it was probably very wise since the Rangers did it professionally and well, and we would end up like the Keystone Cops.
I mean, why take a chance? When you get the Army Rangers here, there's no need, No need for anything else. You got the best, come on, if the bike's not broke, don't fix it.
They did it again and again and again and again and again, and it was, I hate to sound like a surfer, but it was awesome.
When you have 8 helicopters in the air at one time and you have 4 of these huge Black Hawks coming in loaded with U.S. Rangers, and they have to pinpoint where they're going to land on these street corners and rope down and the swirling dust and get to their positions. It's an awesome sight to see. I've never seen anything quite like it.
We did 8 insertions over a 2-day period, and we had no injuries on any of those 8 insertions, so it was very successful, I think.
We're really lucky in the way that we've got 8 real Black Hawk helicopters and Little Birds and real helicopter pilots, some of them who were there in the war, and guys certainly on the ground here who were there. So we've got like an incredible support team.
We have Lee Van Arsdale, who was head of the Delta Force that was here in Somalia. Tom Matthews, who was up in the air for 18 hours, who was the head of the 160th that was here. Both of these men have been invaluable, not only in helping us get the equipment, but also in working as advisors to our young actors and to our director, Ridley, to show them exactly what happened. We have Harry Humphreys, who's an ex-Navy SEAL, who deals with the actors on how to handle the equipment and the guns and deals with the extras to make them look like they're actually U.S. Rangers.
In the early stages of the production, I realized that one person was not going to be able to do a sufficient job in making sure that all units there were in fact represented properly. I requested a department. I laid out a matrix of individuals, or at least identify individuals that should be there. And most of those folks that I've requested, I've gotten as a department. And the result is that we have a team of people that were there that can give us the actual, accurate portrayal of what in fact did occur within their own areas.
There's no reason ever to have bones of contention about what would happen, because you asked what did happen.
You know, we're not doing a war film that took place way back in the day where we can't find these people. These guys were actually in it, so we're lucky.
When you meet some of these guys on the set and they tell you, yeah, I was there overnight. This is what happened. This is how I felt. You know, I was scared. I was not scared. At this moment I had to do this. That was the best research, is meeting those guys.
The relationship we have with the on-set military here is just the same as we have with the rest of the cast. It's integral to the film, and their knowledge is not something that we ignore.
There's many things you learn. I mean, like little things like my shoelaces, the Delta boys, the shoelaces, always tucked in. Everything is always tucked in. They don't want you tripping on your ass and falling on the ground. So everything's tucked in. Everything's meticulous. Everything's thought about where everything is, where all the mags go, where your flash bombs go.
We coach them last minute and refresh their memories on how to do things that they've already been trained in.
Okay, go back and do it again. That was a soup sandwich. Down here, I can provide a lot better security for upstairs because I'm covered than I can if I'm out here with a big bullseye on myself.
The look of the actors is superb in terms of replicating what the combat soldier should look like in a combat environment, i.e. their weapons handling techniques. They're doing the things that they are taught day in and day out. They're doing these things instinctively. Those are issues that I'm looking for, and that's what they're all doing. I'm very pleased with the result of the combat action that we're shooting so far.
Everybody straight on that one? It looked good from where I was. Everybody straight? Okay, good.
So you had the verisimilitude that these men bring. You're seeing a movie that is enormously accurate. Not the actual event, because we certainly had to change things, but the movements of the military through the event.
Let's go, Delta!
Everything in this film looks so real because it is. And it's more of a kick for us because the amount of stuff I've gotten to do with these helicopters, I mean, it's the first time in my life I actually stopped and thought, do I have a will? And if so, have I filled it out properly? I mean, I've done scenes where I've taken off out at the helicopter base and 5 minutes later I'm unhooking myself from a safety harness, jumping off a helicopter into this completely realistic situation where there's cars on fire and smoke billowing through and literally 1,000 extras shooting at you, some 50 cals going off. You're jumping out of a real helicopter, you're having to remember to keep your head down so your head doesn't get chopped off. And then you suddenly got to remember that once you hit the ground, that's when the scene really starts.
So when you're doing that, and especially in the earlier stuff, there's maybe 7 cameras and you don't know where they are. There's cameras in rocks, in the ground, there's cameras in people's backpacks. We don't know where the cameras are. There's 1 or 2 you can see, but you know there's 7 or 8 of them around, which is brilliant. So that means you've got to be on all the time. You know, that's good. There's squibs and explosions going off everywhere, and you don't know where they're going to go off. So you can't be ready to react to them because you don't know where they're going to be. So you just react.
You know, you start the day and you're given a piece of paper, and here's your scene, and it's maybe 2 lines long. You think, okay, you turn up on set. There's a street. There's explosives lined all over it. There's 50 men with guns.
See, I thought this was a musical, so I'm confused by the gunfire constantly.
There goes Twombly. You see that? Yeah, he gets blown up. I begged them to blow me up, and since I've been looking forward to it, and then they blew me up, and it was great. And I feel born again. And anytime that anyone wants to blow me up, like, I'll do that again, because that was great. And they set me on fire and blew me up. I wish it had been bigger, though, you know. I want more explosion. Hopefully they'll do it today.
The biggest part, I think, was the sheer quantity of it. You know, I've done war movies before where you have, like, sections of the movie that are war, bullet hits, explosions, and then it dies down. With this movie, it's bullet hits, explosion, helicopter crashes, never stops.
I will say this, you know, I've never worked on a film before that when they yell action on some of these street sequences, and I've been in some exciting stuff, bouncing all over the ocean on the storm, and when they yell action here, boy, your heart goes, because it starts, everything starts blowing up.
Ready, Simon?
Yeah.
Is this a big bang?
No.
You sure?
The fact that Ridley doesn't stop the explosions for dialogue. I think that the fact that he lets them go. All the M16s are firing, the mortar rounds are going off, the RPGs are going at him, and he says, say your line. So there's complete terror in the actor's eyes.
When Ridley starts blowing up everything around you and shit's pinging off the Humvees, boom, 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 you don't have to act.
You don't have to act at all whatsoever. It's just, I'm really scared.
You can't prepare yourself for that, so there's going to be a lot of real moments on screen.
See that right there? That rocket's going to be going 90 miles an hour, dude.
Oh, shit.
Boom! And there's another RPG that comes right across fucking right here, dude. And fucking bust your ass. Bust your ass.
There's an entire street, I mean, as far as you can see, prepared to explode, you know, and then 12 vehicles shoot around the corner, there's weapons firing.
Shells, hot shells come down top of your head.
Soldiers running everywhere.
Plant pots are exploding in your face.
Explosions in the ground that blow cork in your face.
4 helicopters shooting about on top of you.
The firing pellet guns at you.
Anything's possible at any moment. It's very interesting. I mean, we could literally be shelled, which is... My best work is going to be right now.
Jesus Christ! It's complete madness. We're encountering fire from everywhere. Everyone's firing. It's madness, and it's extremely loud.
It's loud. It's very loud.
It is so loud. Have you noticed how loud it is?
These guns are so loud, and we're actors, we're pussy actors, we're not used to firing big guns, you know, so for a lot of us, this is something that's completely alien, and new.
I remember the first take I did where there were 50 cals and CAR-15s being fired, and it was just an oral assault. You know, it's literally overwhelming the first time you're exposed to that, and, you know, Ridley always has at least 100 militia guys shooting at you at the same time, so it's literally an overload of the senses at first, and then you kind of get used to it, which is even more scary.
Probably the busiest shot, we let off probably 1,200 bullet hits in one take, and then they want to go again, so, you know, 2 takes.
What's really exciting about this is when you're going down the streets, doing the fighting stuff from street to street, it feels like the real deal, you know? And I've done films where the special effects are all done afterwards on computer, and that's all right, but when you're running down these streets, it really feels like you're being shot at.
It's gonna be a hell of a lot more realistic than running away from, you know, something fake, you know, running away from a monster on a green screen. So you hear the noise of the gunshots, you hear the RPGs, you see the explosions right next to you. It feels like you're being shot at.
I get shot at a lot by RPGs, these rocket-propelled grenades. My character, Grimes, he narrowly misses about 4 of them, or they narrowly miss him. So I'm doing a lot of stuff with big booms and the walls being sprayed with 50 caliber machine guns and stuff. And it feels like the real thing. You don't have to act that, you know, you're just running around going, fucking hell.
The first time I had to do any of the serious action in this film, Ridley said, yeah, you'll come around the corner with your men, and then all hell will break loose, and just find some cover. I said, well, that's it. Yeah, be fine. So I come around trying to look super cool and not blink, and suddenly everything got exploding, and I'm just ducking down behind the nearest thing I could find. And he said, well, that was great. Cut, moving on. And I said, no, I don't think I behaved like a soldier. I think I was a little bit more like me, or like Jerry Lewis on a bad day.
I can't explain it. It's just, it's massive. It's huge, like barrage and orchestrated violence.
I haven't felt panic panicked or uncomfortable or anything, and this is my first big film, and I think it stems from the fact that Ridley is so relaxed. There isn't a person in the world who would be under so much pressure and look so calm, and I don't know what pills he takes or what kind of yoga he does or what his secret is, but it doesn't make sense to me. I look at him and he's the most relaxed person on the set.
The whole thing seems to be just a pleasurable Sunday afternoon stroll in the park for him.
It might be pandemonium with things going around, with choppers, things blowing up, but he's got an ease about him. Do you know what I mean? That comes through, and I felt completely at ease, completely at home. And you look around and you think, the way everything is set and shot, you can tell when you're walking. It's almost like walking into a painting, because he's got this incredible vision. He knows exactly what's going on.
He's very visual. I mean, with his storyboards, the Ridley-grams, that he draws out, everyone knows what page they're on.
If you come the other side of the money, you get this light, right?
10 o'clock.
We can do this as a POV long lens tracking shot, right? And we can do it from inside the Humvee or the other side of the Humvee.
Ridley's just got this extraordinary visual gift. He knocks up these little sketches, in 2 seconds. He grabs a pen. I remember the first time I saw one, he came to set and he said, "Yeah, I've just done these little drawings in the car for you here to show you what's going to happen in the scene." And I went, "Bloody hell, he just did that in the car." He said, "Yeah, I didn't have a proper pen or anything, And I went, "No, they're brilliant. Can I have one of those to take home?"
He had this little stack of papers on his desk, white paper, and any chance he got, you go, "Oh, the scene looks something like this," and then he'd draw it out and he'd draw this amazing storyboard. And he'd say, "So, Ken, so the helicopter's here, and the guy's rope in here, and there's Somalis shooting that way, and it looks like this," And I'd go, "Oh my God."
This is front of the screen, Strucker, driving.
I can't remember working with a director who knew exactly what he needed and wanted. I've never seen him phased by anything because he knows exactly what he needs. And I think he shoots the way he's going to edit, which is nice. Sometimes you do films where a director will cover everything always, just so because they don't know how they're going to make it look. Whereas Ridley knows how he's going to make it look, and he knows what he needs, so he shoots what he needs to edit. And that's really interesting to watch. And also, he's absolutely precise and dead on with his direction. I've heard he has a reputation of not directing, and I don't get that at all. If you're in a big wide shot running down the street, you don't need to be told you're in a big wide shot, just run down the street, So he doesn't tell you that. You know where you're going to go, but when you're playing a scene, when the camera's in close, he's there telling you what do you like, or he's pushing you one way or the other,
But just watching someone who seems to make it so effortless, and he seems so unpressured by what's clearly, an enormous project, it's intimidating.
I don't think it quite hit me how big everything was going to be until about, I think it was 4 weeks ago, 5-6 weeks ago, when the helicopters actually turned up.
They arrived in 2 big freighters. So you got 4 big Black Hawks, and then the mini birds, of course, are little demons, these little beautiful little blackbirds. But they managed to get those on 2 big freighters, military freighters, that came and landed in just outside of Rabat.
The American government is the only ones that really has these helicopters. So we had to either make a deal with the government or do it digitally, and we felt it was much more important for the reality of the movie to do it with real helicopters.
If I had to rent helicopters, I couldn't rent Black Hawks. And of course, it's called Black Hawk Down. It's about the Black Hawk. And I would have had to rent Hueys, and Hueys don't look like Black Hawks. And so we went right to the wire in terms of negotiation with the Pentagon about their requirements as to how they wanted to be perceived during the film. But that negotiation took a long time. So I was already in Saleh, already planning, and now in the process of having to turn my schedule around, because I'd planned to do the big
insertion up front with the Black Hawks to get the big thing out the way, and I couldn't because they didn't have the aircraft. And so I had to adjust the schedule, and we just began the film, knowing I had 6 Hueys standing in Germany ready with the black spray cannons ready to spray them. And I was a month into principal photography before I got the helicopters. So it was a little hairy.
I've never seen machines quite as majestic as the Black Hawks, and it's like ballet watching them take off and land, and they're so precise.
I can still remember the day when I was called on set and they said to me, right, you got to stand there, the little birds are going to take off in front of the Black Hawks. And I just stood there and I was like, my God, this is just unbelievable, staggering, you know, and you have a little giggle inside yourself thinking this movie is going to be huge.
I was laying on the ground and, I mean, like they had a Black Hawk hover like to within about, it felt like 10 feet in the ground, and I was just the downforce, and this, everything, the sand blasting up, crushing us, and Eversman's over me and kind of dealing with me, screaming at me. It's like, it's just insanity. I mean, it's like, and it's so much fun. You're like, this is what you do as a kid, man. We're running around with toy guns, and this is real.
For me, it was like, it's like boys with toys on this movie. I'm like a 7-year-old in a grown-up's body, you know, because we've got helicopters, we've got guns.
We've got unlimited amounts of bullets. You're just tearing everything up, and until, I think people are still firing their weapons after they see us cut for ages.
You know, there's another level that maybe some of the other actors, I don't know how much the other actors will admit to this. It's a very serious film in the sense that, you know, we have a sense of responsibility to the people who died and the people who lived, who we've met. But there's a level on which none of us can quite believe that we're getting to run around firing guns and ducking bullets and jumping under things exploding. And what makes it all right, you know, that we're just kids in the playground, is that the soldiers, the real soldiers, say this is a level at which they enjoy it in exactly the same way.
It's a huge rush. I mean, it's like I said, it's like a great game. You know, it's like there's certain things in life that you want to be able to do without having the bad experiences attached to them, and this is one of them, you know. I get to run around with guns and, you know, things blowing up around you, but I don't actually have to kill anybody and nobody's going to kill me, and that's great.
Ridley and I really only had 2 very short conversations about this movie. The first conversation Ridley and I had was, you know, how would we do this? What would the musical genre be? And I just kept thinking we should make it 2 tribes. There's basically the very polished, very precise, very technologically advanced American tribe, and that's one type of music, and, you know, the techno tribe. And the other side is the North African side, you know, and that would be, you know, more ethnic instruments, etc. But they would have equal power, equal strength, equal expression. Even before shooting started, you know, I read more books about the history of Somalia and the history of that than any musician should. This is what happened on this film. I was going to have 3 months, you know, the whole film, the whole schedule moved up. So I can either sit there and be terrified of it and write very carefully and just rely on every bit of knowledge I have and take all that craft and apply it and come up with a score which will absolutely work, or throw all that out and just go, you know, stare the fear in the eyes and just go for it. I wanted to work virtually in the way that the Rangers and the Deltas work in the movie. I mean, stay true to their thing, which is work within a very small group of very, very sophisticated, very highly trained musicians, all with very strong opinions of their own. And that's pretty much why, we built the war room, and the way we've been going about this, there's some tunes I wrote, and then we go in and we just, fight it out amongst ourselves and be dangerous and be exposed about it and have things go wrong and have accidents and be right at the edge of everything.
Fabulous.
In a funny way, because the impression I got from watching the film the first time was there's a vulnerability within this group of soldiers that they only overcome by taking chances for each other, and in a way I'm trying to have that reflect in our process.
Confusing that double C. Isn't that two C's there? Two C's, right? Yeah.
It gets pretty heated in there as well. I've on purpose surrounded myself with very individual thinkers and very strong personalities.
We were waiting for your part to get transposed.
No, it's not that. It's just because if we're gonna get into it, let's get into it.
Let's do it. I got it 4 times and then we should just let it run, right? Okay. No, I tell you what, 4 times is a long time. Well, let's go for it.
One of the things I think which hopefully will differentiate this from anything else anybody has done, there are a lot of things which we just leave to chance. Things we've been doing is literally just playing up against the picture, for 20 minutes, and then taking sections of that and just moving them around, virtually like Jackson Pollock would do with a paintbrush, just doing these huge big brush strokes and not having many things move within it. A lot of it is just, moments are just sort of grabbed. There's one tune which right now only exists on a handheld video camera because we were all playing and I'm going, somebody just somehow get it down because it's a good tune, and the feel is really good. So, all it exists on is a terrible microphone from a video camera, but it's definitely within the spirit, I think, of this movie. It's not just improvisational. I do have a plan, I do have a tune. We try it out and we instantly know the plan is going wrong and we adapt. We come up with new ideas. That's how we work. We go and sit there, watch through the reel, discuss it, discuss the work we have done. We've probably done better things since. We take the bad things out, put the new things in, The other thing which is unusual, usually you just score scene by scene by scene by scene. We're literally scoring the whole movie in one go, whereby, something over here will land up over, in a completely different reel, in a completely different scene. So I'm trying to keep that arc intact all the time. I try to do the same thing with the orchestra. I try to make them into a unit that isn't just a bunch of musicians reading notes. And so with my friend Bruce Fowler, who used to play in Frank Zappa's band, and Frank was very good at just getting his musicians to do very precise but very dangerous things. So he taught the musicians these gestures, like this means play your highest note, this means play your lowest note, this means, slide, with different gradations. So we would do things literally with the orchestra where they would never know what was going to hit them next, but they had to watch. They had to watch us, stay eye contact. So some of these things, they're virtually like sound sculptures. Because one of the things you can't do if you're trying to stay unpredictable in this movie is, oh, it's just the North African instruments, or it's just the American instruments. You know, because that becomes, the unpredictability of that becomes predictable in its own way. So, you know, occasionally I just want to pull back and have the orchestral colors in. So it is more like a sculpture, it's more like a collage, this whole thing. It's such a fragile beast, this film. It's driving me crazy, you know, because I mean, just the opening, you know, just the opening scene as the first helicopter's moving across Somalia and you see the food distribution. Okay, so this is just, you know, us fucking knowledge and praying. And all the percussion is going to be replaced by the double players. First you go, oh my God, look, they're shooting women and children, you know, I mean, the Ardit soldiers. You know, this is terrible, and you want to comment on it in your Western way, you know, in our, you know, European or American moral standards. And in a funny way, what I'm trying to do is not do that for a while, and just let us observe, and let the music just observe. If I start commenting on it too soon, nobody's going to start thinking in the audience. And it's not like we're trying to teach anybody a big lesson, etc. But leave room, acknowledge that an audience is an intelligent body of humans that are allowed to make up their own mind about things.
I mean, I'm 7 against 1 here. Okay, right. I'll say what I think. Please. Here we go. Ready? Yeah. I think the opening on a big screen was so big, right, of the crowds and that it's kind of, if you like, kind of epic scale, right, because of the landscape and I think I love the playing of the string instrument, but is that going to be the foremost instrument or is it going to be subtext? I don't know. Because
right now it's the foremost instrument,
because
small.
I mean, listen, the playing of it is beautiful, but I find that what it does, it holds back the scale of the scene. Right. Is that fair?
Absolutely.
What he does great is he'll remind me of things. You know, he'll remind me of little bits of conversation we had, you know, so I can find my way again. Because right now I'm just, you know, I'm flailing about like crazy, sort of on purpose, trying to leave all reason behind. And what you need is the reasonable man to occasionally come in and say, you know, you're a bit off base here, you know, whatever. And so I'm using him very much as, you know, as the guy who steers the boat. And at the same time, you know, he lets me steer the boat until I shout for help.
7.
hoping, I mean, God, I mean, I'm thinking of the record company that is going to release this. I'm hoping I'm not making a complete mess of it as well, because it's probably the most sort of out there, dangerous soundtrack I've ever done. For Ridley and Jerry Bruckheimer to let me work this way, I don't think Jerry is crazy. He's been too successful. And Ridley's definitely not crazy, but they're just, I bet you they're just praying that I'm pulling it off, because I have pushed them out onto a ledge as well, not just myself. The main tune, the main theme I wrote for this film is, one of the things I was trying to do is I was trying to make it so it was nearly ancient. It could be a Renaissance theme, it could be, it is that soldier, that boy that went to war, every few years, every generation. It could be from the 30-year war, something like that. So just, there seems to be a line of these men that do this job. I was trying to give them that ancientness, the timelessness, and the simplicity of it as well. This is a job they go and do. I don't think that they think of themselves as heroes. I don't think that this is a word that they would ever use to describe themselves. And so I'm trying to not do that, not use that word. So I'm just trying to let you observe. I think Ridley has taken great care to be true to the story and to be realistic. And I desperately am trying to not be manipulative in that sort of filmic way, and to try to, be real, and let you feel what this is like. The only way I know how to write this is by becoming, the movie with all its brutality and all its thing. And I leave here at 6 in the morning, I go to sleep, I dream about it, and these are not pleasant dreams. Give me a sex comedy any day to do. I'd have more fun. So part of it is it's pretty tough on the old psyche. That there's a personal commitment you have to make. And just the idea of not going over old ground that I've done before. It's just a personal challenge. You want to make it as good as possible. They're sitting over there in the dub while we are chatting, trying to get things done, and I'm way behind. And there's only one reason I'm way behind, because I'm ambitious to make it good. I think I owe it to Ridley. I owe it to Ridley in a funny way to the real guys. If I can get that close to doing something that doesn't embarrass them, I think I'm doing pretty good.
The biggest challenge is always to come up with something that looks realistic, really. We're pushing the boundaries of what is acceptable on screen there's a very educated viewing public out there now. I think the more and more sophisticated effects get, the more the viewing public expect.
Definitely part of creating the reality of this piece was putting the actors directly in the center of the action. So what we were doing is enhancing the danger and bringing, you know, the violence and the sort of insanity of the situation right down into the faces of these actors who otherwise would have had to be stunt people.
We had to create very large screen CG effects that would have to stand up to great close-up scrutiny, because that was the feeling we wanted to convey, is this very in-your-face sort of effect that is going to be really, you almost feel it.
We got a Black Hawk down, we got a Black Hawk down.
The capability is extraordinary. And I think in this instance it helped me, you know, tremendously. But I think there's also, you've got to make sure that everything the way you're designing it doesn't look larger than life. So when it starts to look larger than life, then you start to not believe it. So you start to lose the jeopardy.
One of the things we were facing is the huge difference between fantastical effects, the type of things that you'd often do in visual effects where you're simulating something that simply can't exist in real life, therefore is impossible to film and it needs to come from the computer. And this idea of reality-based effects, things that were simply too dangerous or impractical to shoot at the time when production was going on, and then we're called upon to basically go in and edit reality and bring in the necessary storytelling points that they couldn't capture on the day. And I think the viewer is more harshly critical of reality effects than fantastical effects. Because when you see a spaceship up on screen or a huge monster, you know that, you know, what you're looking at is coming from someone's imagination. It doesn't represent anything you've seen in real life, and you have no basis to judge it against other than whether or not does it look real or computery. But when you look at a reality-based effect, which is some very small manipulation of reality that you're not expecting to see, then the slightest thing that's off kilter that cues the eye to the work being manipulated, I think instantly breaks the viewer's suspension of disbelief.
We had to create effects that were totally believable and in some ways almost had a heightened sense of realism, so that we're able to capture the drama and what really happened out there. And on this film in particular, this revolved around the actual crashing of the helicopters.
This is 6-1, I'm hit. I'm hit.
The original tack on approaching the crashing helicopter was based on more of an in-camera effect. And I think Neil, Cobbold and Ridley had discussed ways of creating this, perhaps before we'd been part of the conversation.
So the tail was here. Where's Slav? Where's the tail goes there. If the camera was here, low, you'll have the whole tail pass over your head.
John, bring the answer crash box here.
His methodology, which has worked very well on several of the shots in the sequence, was to reconstruct a full-size Black Hawk helicopter, and using a complicated wire rig which is suspended by an 80-foot crane, actually crash this full-size helicopter for real. Which, you know, if you can do something for real, then do it for real. I mean, I stand by that as well. If you can create something that looks realistic in camera, then that's fantastic.
With the helicopter crash, we're using the same 160-ton crane, and then we're straining 2 wires over about 150 metres down to a point in the ground. Then we've got a lightweight helicopter that we suspend from the cables, and then we basically release it, and it comes down the wires, crashes through a fountain, and as it crashes through the fountain, we release it from the wires, hits the ground, and that's what gives us the impact of the crash.
So our work on those shots was to basically remove the crane and the wire rig by shooting and using clean backgrounds that we would then paint away the wires, and then add the element that couldn't be done for real, which was the rotor blades turning. So those were always going to be done in CG. The biggest limitation with the setup, unfortunately, was that it couldn't spin, the helicopter couldn't spin, and as the edit developed after the practical effects had been shot, it became apparent that really the helicopter had to be spinning to work in sequence and in the continuity of the order of events. And And this is really where we sort of reanimated a lot of those shots that perhaps were originally intended to be done using the full-size mock-up. To achieve all of this, basically, we produced a series of animatics for Pietro, whereby using background plates that I shot in Morocco, we put our CG helicopter into those background plates. So we had full-length takes of a crashing helicopter. These different camera views could then be edited together by Pietro in a sequence, so we could establish the sequence and the order of events and which camera views he wanted to use of the crashing helicopters. And at this point we were just using a simply shaded CG model. But that allowed us to determine the speed of the helicopter, the position, the distance it travelled through the shot, where it ultimately ended up and its size. Once we'd established all of that and the edit itself was locked on this sequence, we were then able to take it to the next stage, where we then start applying our highly detailed CG model. The computer-generated Black Hawk is a model, but it exists in the computer, and it's a highly detailed version of the real thing that we have at a high resolution in the computer, because we're also comparing our CG model in scenes where you see a real helicopter. It has to be good enough to actually stand up to scrutiny, and because of this we had to go into a lot of detail, and the texturing, we had to pay a lot of reference to the real things, and the way that the actual, even down to the way that the oil stains on the body appeared, and the slight riveting on the actual detail and the way that the panels are constructed. We really paid a lot of attention to that, and obviously used the real reference of the filmed footage of the real helicopters, and that's the best way of sort of matching something, is to refer to the real thing. We had 4 real Black Hawks on location in Morocco, which we were able to photograph and film and use for textures as well as just lighting reference. And we had to construct the helicopter, obviously, of course, and to do that we had to try and find sources basically on how to build a Black Hawk helicopter, and one person found some plans on the internet, but most of what we did came from 2 manuals basically, which are a bit like car manuals. And it's literally sort of, it's everything you wanted to ever know about a Black Hawk helicopter. And based on those and some measurements that we took from the real things, we reconstructed a CGI version of the real thing. And then the final stage, really, to sort of make the thing work and be convincing, was to create real practical effects, which I decided to do as a scaled miniature shoot. But in order to generate the effects, I thought the best way of perhaps doing this was to actually use something that mimicked the helicopter itself. So we got hold of a body shell of a 6th scale Black Hawk that the special effects guys had built, and we actually constructed a model mover. So what we did is we programmed the model mover with the animations from our CG, and therefore were able to recreate, using this 6th scale miniature, our crashing helicopter, dressing a false floor with the dust and the sand and the debris and the rocks, and shot this as a series of elements on blue screen and black screen, and then we're able to actually pull those elements off using keying and soft matting techniques and layer those with the 3D animations, and therefore created a real convincing practical effect that we needed, that had to be sort of realistic looking. And hopefully the sequence works so well that you don't know what's a real helicopter, what's a CG helicopter, and what's a model helicopter that's been crashed on the location. It's a combination of different techniques, really. In the 2 sequences where Walcott and Durant, who are the 2 pilots of the 2 helicopters that go down, get hit, once they're hit in the tail rotor and lose control of their tail rotor, that they get sent into an uncontrollable spin, basically. And the pilots were able to recreate that effect of a spinning helicopter for real, that we were able to film. Again, part of the events involve, once the tail gets hit by the RPG, obviously there's a fire goes on inside the back of the sort of gearbox, and this emits quite a lot of black smoke, and we weren't, for obvious reasons, able to put anything onto the helicopter. in the way of smoke canisters or anything that might hinder visibility or flying ability of the real helicopters. So those were digital effects that we added later to the real helicopters in terms of adding bits of damage to the tailpiece, removing the real rotors, and then adding CG smoke and fire to the tails.
One of the things we realized right away when we started animating the helicopters was that it was very easy to make a helicopter that looked like it was moving wrong. And we'd thought, since we hadn't done a lot of this sort of thing with CG helicopters before, that a helicopter would just basically fly around like a bug and anything you did would look correct. But once you actually get it up there on the screen and it looks like the real thing, its movement can very quickly cue the viewer to it being an artificial element. Helicopters basically hang from their propeller, and their movements are controlled by the shifting of weight beneath that swash plate, the central control mechanism. So it's important for us to duplicate that so that as a helicopter tipped forward, you'd see the various portions of the move that you were always seeing and really not paying much attention to with the real helicopters, as the blades go forward and then the body sort of tilts back to accommodate that. And each one of those things happens one after another in fairly quick succession. When you put them all together, they generate this very real sense of a helicopter flying around. And if you didn't do that, which is what we tried initially, what you got was this feeling of a toy. And especially when we were dealing with things in the distance, it didn't take much for them not to look real. So we found that by duplicating reality wherever possible, especially in the movements and the jointing system of the helicopter, we were able to get things that moved in a much more realistic manner.
Some of the challenges on this film involve creating effects that we hadn't actually worked on before. I mean, dust is something that you see quite often, but it's still, I've seen it many times and it doesn't look convincing or realistic in CG. And we wanted to develop a way of creating absolutely believable dust and debris and particles, which, just to explain why we were doing that, there's a sort of strong story point in the film where these helicopters are so enormous and the downdraft from the actual helicopters themselves is so immense that once they go into position to drop the Rangers, who fast rope out of the helicopters from about 60 feet, they literally create a dust storm underneath them that gets so intense that you get a 50, 60 foot cloud of dust, whereby visibility goes to zero. So we had to control the dust on the set, which involved wet downs and making the ground damp to actually limit the amount of dust and allow the cinematographers to actually film the action. That then meant that we had sequences where there was a lot of dust and other sequences where there was none. And one particular moment, which is quite crucial in the film, when the character Blackburn falls out of the helicopter and is sort of lost in the middle of this dust storm. Unfortunately, during this sequence, there was no dust, so the whole idea of conveying the fact that this whirlwind was around them and they were lost from their other comrades wasn't conveyed, so we had to develop this photorealistic way of creating dust and sort of debris, newspaper being blown around, which we've done for several shots during the sequence. We have a lot of handheld shots whereby we had to track those camera moves and then apply those camera moves in CG to create the dust and the debris, and would then work in the live action plate. And that all has to match and work with the other shots where there was real practical dust, and that was quite a challenge in itself.
The mill had tackled most of these shots, and we were given the unenviable task of duplicating the effect another company had done for one very big, wide, dramatic shot. We took a huge number of different approaches to this because we were trying to duplicate a lot of someone else's R&D in a fairly short period of time, and we kept running up against a brick wall to get the feeling of, dust washing through this square where it actually interacted with the buildings, where there was little bits of paper and plastic bags flying around. It took us quite some time to actually nail, and it was, I think, one intensive 48-hour period with Nathan, the senior visual effects supervisor, actually sitting on an inferno for that entire period, working with elements constantly streaming up from the 3D department before we actually got it. We were able to turn that shot around at the very last minute of the show. One of the challenges that we faced was we needed to generate a huge amount of damage to the streets of Mogadishu in a very short period of time because our post-production schedule was quite compressed. So we developed a tool that would allow the artist to basically drag a crosshair across the screen as though he was aiming a virtual gun, and the computer would calculate damage based on the firing rate of the gun and just explode things randomly following the line of fire of the crosshair. We used that to choreograph a lot of the action scenes. It involved a lot of bullets flying to and fro. The system ended up having quite a video game feel to it, and I have to admit it was pretty fun, and we did spend a couple of hours just playing around blowing things up and seeing what the effects would be. But the end result was that we were able to choreograph these scenes quickly and generate a huge amount of chaos in a fairly short period of time just by playing virtual sniper and running the crosshairs across the walls of buildings. Part of creating the reality of this piece was putting the actors directly in the center of the action. So you can take your featured performers, your Josh Hartnett's and Ewan McGregor's, who you probably don't want to blow walls right beside them so that they're sprayed with little chunks of concrete and flying metal and ricocheting bullets, and allowing us to drop them right there, you know, an inch away from a big CG explosion or effects that we shoot separately. In picking up elements, we did a day of element shooting where we shot hundreds of exploding concrete blocks and bullet hits and sparks and shell casings. We were able to take all of these separate elements and on the computer, you know, as different layers, stick them literally right on top of the actors with the plates that Ridley had shot over in Morocco. Assault sequence at the end of the film, they had shot real little birds firing blanks, strafing down these long city blocks, synced with pyrotechnic explosions, spark explosions, and there were definitely some issues with timing, and overall the look that they had was a bit sparse because the entire rooftop was peppered with extras and actors pretending to shoot up at the little birds. And of course there were no traces either, because traces are actually quite dangerous, nasty things in real life. So one of our challenges there was to go in and add traces to the little birds, connect them to the explosions that weren't necessarily timed correctly to how they were firing, and then add enough extra damage that we would actually believe that these little birds were disassembling these structures and knocking them almost flat over the series of the strafing run. The reason that we often went with a live element as opposed to a CG element was that level of detail that you get out of something shot live, especially something, a dynamic explosive event like a bullet hit on a concrete block that's shot at high speed, means that you can orchestrate that on the computer. You can rotate it, shift it in 3D, you can treat it as a 3D element, though it is a 2D piece of film, and position that wherever you want, and it's always going to have that characteristic chaotic, marvelous, random real-life feel to it. We often orchestrated things on the computer where we generate with a 3D particle system a choreography for a scene that would show us where the bullets were going to hit, who was shooting whom. Then when it comes to the finishing touches of actually putting on that explosive event on the concrete walls, we'd go back and we'd find the elements that we'd actually shot and use those to substitute in for the original particle generated effect, because we felt that you could sense the realness.
The largest crowds we had to generate were for the opening scenes at the grain distribution point. They had about 1,000 to 2,000 real extras on set, and we've probably added another 5,000 or 6,000. To create digital people, we have to start with movement, and to create the movement we use a system called motion capture, and that involved us recording and capturing the movement of people walking, running, jogging, sort of ambling, strolling, various different movements that we would need to apply to our CG characters. So once we've established what the movements they're going to be performing and where they're going to be, we then have to sort of put the CG character in there, and that person has to be photographically real looking person. And we do that by using texture maps that we generate from real people. So we photograph the real Somali extras, and then we literally stick them onto our CG characters. So we probably build 20 or 30 different body types. We then scale the body type, so we have variation in scale and size. We vary the walk cycles, the speed they're walking. And we also then use the basic costumes and color correct them, so we can generate thousands of extras. So out of 20 or 30 extras, we create thousands basically, and the variation gives you the believability.
I think one of the most interesting challenges of what we do is a lot of my job is something that pretty much anyone can do. You look at the computer screen, you stand behind the artists that are doing this work, and you look at the screen and you say, that doesn't look right. Now, anybody can do that because it's something that just looks wrong. The trick is knowing how to fix that, and so much of this actually lies on the shoulders of the artists. But that's the interesting challenge of visual effects, is everybody can see a bad visual effect. The second it comes up on screen, there's no way to hide it. The reason it's bad is because it stands out. Once you do your work perfectly, then it disappears into the background and nobody sees it. Especially on a film like this, where our work involves not creating something that wasn't there in the first place, but enhancing something that already was.
Ultimately, it's not a film where you go and say, oh, look at the effects on that film. It's ultimately a film where you go and you come out saying, wow, I've seen a great film. And it's only afterwards you start thinking, well, there must have been some effects in there because, you know, that helicopter really did crash and those people did get thrown out and there was a guy there, you know, seemed to be thrown to the ground. And it's all those effects that we add, and we can bring an extra dimension to the film and that make it real and believable, yet don't really stick out as effects. And I think that's always going to be the ultimate compliment.
October 3rd, 1993 was certainly a monumental day in my life. In fact, I don't think there's been another event that has come anywhere close on the emotional side of the scale that would even begin to touch what happened to me and the other guys from Task Force Ranger in Somalia.
This was the most significant military event in my 28 years of service. It was the most significant military operation possibly that this nation has experienced since Vietnam.
This is the largest single fight since the Tet Offensive, ground combat. I mean, this had everything that soldiers could be called upon to do in here.
I didn't know too much about it. It's like a lot of people didn't really, because there wasn't a lot of news coverage, it seemed, at the time about this incident.
I was a little bit angry with myself for not knowing more about the battle, and I felt a bit guilty about it. And I just felt that it was a type of movie that once people had little triggers of information, they would remember.
The few people that do remember Mogadishu, there's a lot of misunderstanding in it, and really, I don't think there's a lot of people that don't know what happened over there or have no clue. I think the only vision that's ingrained in anybody's head, to get them to remember a period of time, was to say that, do you remember the time that they were dragging an American body around the street? Now that, they'll instantly say, yeah, a lot of them won't have any clue where in the world it was, but that vision of that, you know, of the pilot getting drug around is ingrained into people's, into people's minds.
I remember pictures of Durant I remember images of the video that was shot of him when he was captured.
I remember having a very strong emotional reaction for some reason to that image of his face of being beaten, and then those powerful images of the guys being dragged through the streets.
But what really shook me was that it just was off the front page really quickly.
CNN might have covered it for 2 or 3 days and it was over. And you would have missed some very important things that happened to some very important young men in our military.
I had no idea why the Americans were in there. I had no idea that they were pulled out of there just after this. I didn't know that they'd been in doing missions prior to this, and that this one just went all wrong.
I'm almost embarrassed that I didn't know more about it, and now that there has been this fabulous book, and now that we're doing this movie, I think a lot more people can become aware of what this day in hell was like for the Americans and the Somalians involved.
These kind of things happen all the time, and they just pass right by your life, and if you don't take time to take a look, you forget what people are doing all around this world. It's not just America, but, you know, all over the world.
I hope people realize how small, Mogadishu was to the public. It was such a huge thing to everybody involved, and all the families that were scarred for a long time from it.
This film has immense responsibility for the events that occurred in Mogadishu, in that history has poorly recorded the actual event the way it in fact did happen. It has poorly recorded the bravery and in fact the winning, if you will, of the combative elements on the ground, the U.S. elements. It has shown them in a very poor light.
It's really important to document these events for history and for future generations, and film is a very easy medium for people to grab hold of and get lots of information in a very short period of time.
The fact that it actually happened and not too many people know about it or know that much information about it, this will help educate people about the incident, the event, and pay tribute to those guys that sacrificed their lives.
18 young Americans died on the streets of Mogadishu, and I think that it's very important for us to honor their memory, to remember that sacrifice. Those families live every day with that loss. So just on that level, it's an important story and worth remembering.
It's important to show, what these kids went through and what war is all about. It's you're thrown into a situation, and a lot of people say that, a lot of controversy about this, that they shouldn't have been there. But that's not what it's about. It's about, a group of men that were assigned with the task that had to do their job. And as far as I'm concerned, they did their job. And I think this movie will show that when they were faced with adverse situations, they conquered, overcame, and, they did what they had to do.
The interesting thing is you speak to the people that were there and people in the military here, and it's never really viewed as a disaster or as a bad mission, because they still got key personnel and they got them out, and it's more, it's always a tragedy when people lose their lives, but I've since understood that they're right and that the mission was successful in so many ways.
Uniform 6-4, ready for extraction. Over.
Roger that. There's the call. Let's move out! Let's move out!
This was, in fact, a successful mission from a military perspective, a tactical perspective. We had a job to go get 2 of ID's top lieutenants and any of their bodyguards who may have happened to have been around that day. And that's exactly what we did. Now, obviously it didn't go according to plan. We certainly didn't plan on losing 18 of our comrades. But anytime you go into a gunfight, you know that there's a risk that someone could certainly get wounded or killed.
What I learned first and foremost, so it's probably the hardest thing for me as a young soldier, is that when we send American forces, the reality is that in combat, armed conflict, soldiers, good, well-trained young men are going to die at the hands of an inferior enemy. That is reality.
The theory about armies and armed forces is that in the best and highest notion about that is that it's to save lives, not take lives. Nobody wants to go in there and shoot. Everyone wants to go in there, get in, get out, and be efficient. And not a shot was fired would be ideal, but of course that was not to be.
We have evolved into a certain mindset that no one's life can be lost, and from a certain perspective, that's good. I lost some very good friends out there that day in Somalia, and don't want to lose any more. But when you commit military forces to engage in armed combat, there's certainly a risk that you're going to have some KIA, and you do everything you can to minimize it. But when that does occur, it does not mean a failed mission.
The mission was a success in a narrow military sense. You know, they set out that day to capture these two men, and they accomplished their mission. It was a failure in that they obviously accomplished the mission at a far, far greater cost than they had ever imagined. And in a sense, they won the battle but lost the war, in that the war was to try to make a better country out of Somalia, to try and enable the warring factions in Somalia to get together and form a coalition government. And it was thought that by removing Mohammed Farah Aidid's organization, they would enable that to happen.
I wish there was a way to work it out that you could go and you could make things better. But unfortunately, in a lot of these places, and in a lot of the world, you know, fights have been going on for too long.
I think it's pretty hard to come in and change that history in a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day period. That's been going on for thousands of years.
We may have the only really huge, powerful modern military on the planet at this point, but there are limits to what you can accomplish with it. And it's also a very blunt instrument. I mean, you can't do subtle things with your military force. There are some things that they can do extremely well, but trying to nudge a political impasse in a small country like Somalia, trying to make Jeffersonian democracy flourish where it has nothing to do with that culture or history, is a task that is certainly well beyond the capability of even our American military. So I think we went through a period in our country where we believed that because we have this tremendous power, that we could remake the world in an image that we all think is correct. But the truth is that the world is a much more dangerous and stubborn place than any of us imagine. But when this battle happened and there was so much loss of American life, the American Congress and the President lost their stomach, really, for the mission. So even though technically it was successful, it very certainly was, in a larger sense, a very big failure.
This is a very important turning point in American and global foreign policy, because seeing the body bags come home affected decision-making for years to come, and that's why possibly millions of people were hacked to death in Rwanda. That's why the West was very non-interventionist in the Balkans conflict. This is an interesting film because it will bring to life the story behind the news items that we all flick over from on the TV. And when we sit around and pontificate and say we should send our troops in there, or we should get that guy out, or we should arrest Radovan Karadzic, or one of the people who the War Crimes Commissions want, to bear in mind what happens when you do that is that 19 and 20-year-old boys risk their lives. So you better be damn sure that you want them to go and do the thing you want them to do.
For instance, the way we're proceeding in Afghanistan now, I think, is almost a direct result of events like that in Somalia. The caution, the way this attack and retreat kind of stuff, you know, and not setting down and trying to establish a ground force right away, and all of that, I think is very cautionary now. We're trying to be very careful about how we go into those countries.
I do believe that there is a lesson to be learned, and I hope that folks will come away from this movie and realize not, oh, that's so terrible, we should never use the military. They ought to come away saying, that's a damn brave bunch of men that we have out here. And I'm very happy that we've got people like that serving our country.
I want them to walk out of the cinema feeling as though they were in the Humvee with us. They were in the Alamo with us. They were in that Target building with us. I really do think they'll come out of the film feeling as though they've been through the battle with the soldiers, with the actors.
I think it's going to bring home to Americans just what these guys have to endure and how heroic they all are. And we need people like this to help us stay free.
We have a lot of American soldiers there who were in Somalia and who did a hell of a job. And it went unnoticed in a way. And I hope that people will kind of give the guys credit because what they did there was truly amazing.
I mean, we don't ask for thanks. You know, I joined the military to serve my country. I don't need a pat on the back for it. But for people to realize there are real humans behind this machine that provides freedom to this country, you know what I mean, and tries to help out the world. And sometimes things go wrong, but at least we're trying to do the right thing out there, I believe.
It's the femoral artery, but I can't see it, which means that it's retracted up into the pelvis, which means that I have to find it and clamp it. The only way to stop the bleeding, I got no more IVs, so I'm gonna need you to assist.
I hope they realize what these guys went through, and they, you know, it's a true story, and when they see it, they're gonna say, my God, they actually went through that and got out. And for them to know that there are guys out there doing this in places around the world that half the time they don't even know about, and, you know, to do them respect.
So I think that a lot of people forget actually how horrific war is. They forget how it affects people's lives, and for a lot of people it's something they see on CNN, and it's not real.
A lot of war movies have, you know, glorified battle in general.
From my experience, there's nothing glorious about combat and about war and about battle. It's as I said before, it's terrifying and it's horrible.
This movie is just absolutely brutal. It's not, there's no sentiment. It's you see a bunch of young guys, poor guys, and you know, guys like myself, you know, mid-30s, get their asses shot off.
It's a really horrific situation, and what you can't help but sympathize with the people that find themselves stuck in the middle of it, namely these American soldiers. But I don't think that the film takes a strongly pro-American line. Obviously, you're with the American soldiers for the majority of the film, but it's not a gung-ho presentation as far as I can tell. I actually think that would be as insulting to the men that were there and the families of the men that died there as anything else.
For me, it's not so much about the bravery of the American troops or the injustice of the Somalians. For me, war is wrong, and that is the basis for me, with which I hope people take away from this film. You know, I just hope they see it as an anti-war film.
I think any war film is an anti-war film, really, and particularly in this instance.
Well, as I've matured, whatever, and I think as maybe the country's matured, we know that war is truly ugly and horrible.
War is shit, you know? We should always try and avoid it. So I think if you make films that are graphically violent and realistic about it, and you see what the horror of people being blown up or losing limbs and things like that, although it's shocking to see, it's much better than a kind of goody-baddy war film where the good guys win at the end, and you know you're unaware of the people who are dying or maimed.
It's very easy to say war is futile, don't do it. But I think what's unique about this is that war is futile, but sometimes it's also unavoidable, and we're also going to have to keep continuing this sort of thing. And that's the understanding I get now after the level of research and the level of exposure I've had to the military. I'm more accepting of that now than I was before. Before, it was just part A, it was just war is futile. But now I have more understanding as to war is futile, but you know, it also at times is unavoidable, and we have to want to keep doing the right thing by our fellow man, and that unfortunately is going to mean that there are going to be many more battles.
It doesn't glorify war or why we were there or who was right or who was wrong.
There are two sides to every story. Somalians are not bad people.
I mean, I don't know what you would do if someone came to your neighborhood and started, you know, shelling you. You have to defend yourself. No one was right here. It's just insanely and incredibly unfortunate what went down.
There's a lot of people that died in Somalia. There are 18 U.S. servicemen that died. There are Pakistani soldiers that died. There are many people that died. There are two sides to every story. I think that this story, the telling of Black Hawk Down, will shed some light on the fact of, you know, sometimes the best laid plans just don't work out.
It is as close to what happened as we can get it with telling the story of these guys and making it, you know, taking some dramatic license to make it, you know, to have the story structure and the arc and the pace and all of those things, but it's really a documentation of what happened.
The ideal thing in all of this, I hope, is that this film can be seen by both factions and say, that's what happened. Everyone was really efficient. And at the end of the day, like all wars, you know, no one really wins. You know, you just count the cost.
You know, my feeling is I want to be a part of telling this story. I want to be a piece of the puzzle that tells Black Hawk Down. And that's why I'm here and happy to be here.
I'm very proud to be able to show America well, the things they can't see, and to hopefully be able to illustrate the type of men these guys are.
I'm extremely honored to be associated with the Rangers and to go through the little bit of training that I did. That's a very special thing for me, and I hope that one day I'll be walking down the street and an ex-Ranger will come up to me and go, thank you, you know, you've done us proud.
What's really important to me and maybe to a few of the other actors is how the families are going to respond to this film.
I truly hope that the families of the soldiers that were killed in this battle are really heartfeltly happy about the film and the way it turns out, and that this is an appropriate celluloid monument to those people.
You know, if we can make a film which kind of, you know, puts something back in for the family and friends of that, just to say, look, these guys, you know, they did what they were trained to do, and they did it well.
When I go home, people ask me, hey, Hoot, why do you do it, man? Why? You some kind of war junkie? I won't say a goddamn word. Why? They won't understand. They won't understand why we do it. They won't understand it's about the men next to you. And that's it. That's all it is.
On a personal level, I think the value of this movie is it's a chance to show the American population a side of their military that they never get to see in special operations, and a part of the military of where common valor is a common virtue among the young Americans that are serving every day out in the United States Armed Forces, not just within Special Operations Command and not just on October 3rd, 1993. That valor exists today in our guys, and it's important that we show that. And also it's important that an event as significant as that was to so many people, so many families touched by that we don't forget that. And that people need to be reminded of that as heroic as many generations in this country have been, they still have those people serving every day in the military, and we're still out there doing it for them.
If the people of the United States
can get an appreciation for their armed forces and say, my gosh, we have some good people that are courageous, that are willing to lay their lives out to maintain, you know, the way our life goes here. I'll feel good about that. And we're one of you. We're your sons and daughters and brothers and neighbors. And I just want American people to have a good appreciation for their military forces.
What I would hope that every viewer of this movie would take away from the movie is an understanding that they didn't have when they walked in that theater about what the United States military does, the extremes and the sacrifices that these soldiers are willing voluntarily to offer up any day of the week in pursuit of our nation's goals. And what I want this country to know, and anybody that views this to know, is to have an understanding of the heroism, the dedication, the professionalism, the quiet professionalism that is out there in the United States military today. And even though most people probably won't remember a lot about this particular mission from 8 or so years ago, they will come out of that and say, look at the dedication and the sacrifices and the professionalism, the heroism that these soldiers today exhibited and are willing to do whenever called upon by their nation.
For obvious reasons, it's important to me that the tale get told accurately and realistically, and we don't miss the fact that that was not a failed mission. It was not a debacle. It was some damn good soldiers went in and did something that I'm not sure any other military force on the planet could do against those odds.
Without sounding ridiculously brave as it is to be 8 years later, I would tell you that I would go back, as I'm sure all the other Rangers would, and perform that same mission with the same group of men in the same chain of command on the same setting again. You know, that's how good that task force was. Like I said, you know, the valuable lesson for me is that, unfortunately, and as elementary a lesson as that sounds, you know, good men are going to die in combat. But our mission was a success, without a doubt. I will go to my grave telling everybody that wants to listen, that mission on October 3rd was a success.